Mother, how long have we been traveling?
Approximately 24 days.
Ash? Any suggestions from you or Mother?
No, we're still collating.
I've got access to Mother now, and I'll get my own answers. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Clara, but you can call me Mother. And you are listening to Yutani, the podcast for all things alien, AI, robotics, sci-fi, and technology.
Hello, this is Clara, but you can call me Mother, and welcome to another episode of the Yutani podcast. Today I have a special guest with me, Robert Tercek, who is the director of Hybrid World Adelaide. Hello, Robert. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thanks. I'm psyched to be here. I think it's great that you're interested in this stuff.
Yeah, I obsess about it. So it's really great that there's even, a convention for geeks or nerds like me that like this sort of thing. So could you tell us about Hybrid World and what it's all about?
Yeah, sure thing. So the idea for Hybrid World is simply, it began with the idea that they were going to bring in the world's fastest internet to Adelaide in South Australia. And that process started a couple of years ago. And I met some people from the government there, and they said, nobody here knows what you would do with a high-speed internet connection. We're not sure. We think we have perfectly good broadband right now. And I thought, oh my gosh, the broadband in Australia is so slow. You definitely need this high-speed network. And they said, what would we do with it? And I said, have you got a half hour? And I started to tell them all the different ideas, how it will change the city, how it will change the way cars work, the way we educate people, the jobs, the opportunities. And they listened with total attention. They said, do you know people who are doing this? And I said, yeah, all over the world, there are experts in these technologies. And if you'd like, we can gather them in Australia. And they said, just do that. Just help us do that. So my job as the curator, I find some of the people that are working on the most exciting new technologies around the world, and we bring them all together to Adelaide at this event called Hybrid World. There's three parts to Hybrid World. There's a public part. It's a public showcase of all kinds of new technology. And the idea there is simple. We want to make it accessible, family-friendly, and show people that this is not scary stuff like some science fiction movie. This is actually stuff that's going to improve our lives. So that's a public festival of technologies. Last year, we had everything from Coding Academy and a game design workshop. We had demonstrations of drone racing and robotics. So we're trying to make this technology accessible and understandable to people. There's two other parts of Hybrid World. We have a weekend-long boot camp where we take small startup companies and bring together some world-class experts and some local experts who serve as mentors. And we train them and groom them and prepare them. And then there's a pitch festival where these companies will pitch their ideas. And the winning companies, the companies that pitch most successfully, those companies will actually get a check funding for their idea to go build their idea. So that's the boot camp.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's the startup lab. And then the third thing that we do is the one I'm the most excited about. This is a conference. It's a 2-day conference where we gather some of the leading thinkers from Australia, from South Australia, but also from all over the world, to come in and talk to us about the technologies that are going to matter the most in the next 5 years. And last year, this was an astoundingly good program. I am so excited about it. We've been working for a year to put together this year's program, and now it's twice as big, it's twice as long. So it'll be a great value for anyone who wants to attend. It's a 2-day conference that starts on July 23rd and continues on the 24th. And that's kind of the end of Hybrid World. The actual public festival will wrap around the preceding weekend. And so everything starts off on the 20th and it continues through the weekend. The boot camp for companies will happen on the weekend as well. And then the public conference happens, the business conference happens on Monday and Tuesday. And so you can think of it then as a conference wrapped around a startup boot camp. And then wrapped around all of that is this great big public event. I think last year something on the order of 10,000 people came to the public event, which is really cool.
Wow.
And this year we'll have even more stuff. Yeah, so it's fun. It's like a festival. We had live action role play games. It was really, really fun last year. And what we're trying to do is two things. It's partly to demystify technology. For instance, I just spoke to an Australian journalist about this about a few minutes ago. And the things she referred to are, she talked about data breaches, she talked about Big Brother spying on us, and she talked about the Terminator. And I was like, really? That's what you call journalism? I couldn't believe it, because these narratives we've heard a million times, right? it's a great line in the journalistic trade. If you want to sell newspapers, just tell people about the scary future that's coming. You can freak them out and get them all paranoid about it. To me, this is a great disservice, and journalists shouldn't do it. And I actually criticized her for it in the interview because I said, look, you should be telling your audience why this is good, not why they should be afraid of the future. People should embrace it. One of the reasons why Australia has been a lagging country in terms of its adoption of technologies, and particularly startup businesses, is because of this attitude that somehow the future is scary and the future is going to disempower us or it's going to take away my job or something. That's the wrong attitude. The people that are good at this stuff are the people who go, I don't care about any of that. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to create my own opportunities. And they see every one of those dark things or problems as an opportunity to do a job better. I think that frame of mind is what's most important. So that's what we're bringing with Hybrid World. It's a chance to empower people by getting them familiar with the technology, demystifying the technology, talking about opportunities, showing what all the universities in Adelaide are doing with these technologies, and then bringing in the best Australian companies, the companies that are developing all this technology in Australia. We're going to showcase those as well. Wow. I'm so excited about this program. I can't even wait.
I can't wait either. And it feels like I should be moving to Adelaide if they're going to have like the world's fastest internet.
Yeah, that's right. You could do your podcast with video instead of just audio.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wow, that's just really, really cool stuff. But yeah, like I know that media really likes to sensationalize the coming of AI, and there are, I guess, leaders in technology that feel that we should be afraid. But I think fear always comes when there is an absence of knowledge and information. And I think you're right with demystifying the whole thing and making people feel more comfortable because they have a better understanding. We will be more prepared. So I'm all on board for that. That's great.
Yeah, and look, let me respond to the fear factor because it's out there. You know, we have people who are greatly respected, like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking, until he died recently. Bill Gates. These are some of the world's leading technologists and scientific minds. So people have a lot of respect for them. They have great credibility, and they've all issued these scary pronouncements about robotics and artificial intelligence. And I think it's really reckless for them to do that. There's no doubt that there are big issues that we need to discuss. And so I welcome the debate. I welcome the discussion. But here's the thing. There is no general artificial intelligence. We're nowhere near a general artificial intelligence. That's not even on the roadmap right now. Every use of artificial intelligence, every single use that is currently being done is a narrow version. It's a domain-specific version that only does one thing. And so to be afraid of that kind of artificial intelligence is deeply disempowering because it means that you're going to overlook an opportunity to get superpowers in a particular field. If you apply that artificial intelligence in your field where it's appropriate, it can make you super powerful. And so for a company, that could be a competitive advantage that would be decisive in making that company more successful. But if people are getting conditioned to the story that somehow this is the Terminator or it's going to be Skynet or it's all negative, then we're going to become passive. We're not going to embrace those opportunities. We're going to resist those opportunities. We're going to think that they're somehow bad for us because we've been conditioned by these people who tell us these stories. Now, here's the interesting thing. Those famous technologists I just mentioned, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, many others, they don't work in this field. They're technologists, but they're not actually working in the artificial intelligence field. They don't speak with expertise. Every expert in the field has warned of a whole different set of issues that are very present and very real that we should take seriously, but they're not the Skynet or Terminator issue. Those are, I think, a silly fantasy that says more about how we're afraid of other people than it says anything about how we're afraid about technology. We are afraid of other people, and other people tend to misuse technology to harm us in some ways. And that's a real legitimate concern to have. But that's not a technology problem. That's a people problem.
Yes, that's true. And I think as well, people kind of mix up the message that science fiction is supposed to give us food for thought. It's a reflection on, it's an analogy on a lot of human problems and how we could solve them and how we could overcome them. It's not a comment on technology itself. And when people think it's about only technology, then they've completely missed the message.
That's right. Also, look, science fiction stories are great. They're there to entertain us, first and foremost. They do enlighten us, right? They educate us in some respects. They can inspire us. But mostly they're there to entertain us. And if you're doing a movie these days, then it has to have conflict, right? You can't have a conflict-free movie. It wouldn't be interesting. So where's the conflict going to come from? Well, I guess it's human versus machine. My perspective is that most of these stories are poorly informed. They don't reflect any kind of facts. They create great fear, and it's this kind of like generalized fear that you can't really do anything with. So it's disempowering to the people who have it. What I do know is that every person who's working with these technologies today is super inspired, and they can tell you for an hour. Honestly, I'll introduce you to them when you come to the event. They will chew your ear off telling you about all the positive uses of technology. And so I find it maddening that I can't connect with a journalist who understands this. Mostly it's people in the journalism field are so stressed out these days. They're so busy and they're stretched so thin that they don't have time to do the kind of research they need to prepare for a discussion like this. So they just reach for the nearest cliche, a story we've all heard. And I think that that's just lazy journalism. So I'm going to resist that story. It's one of the reasons I'm talking to you so much. I like talking to you because you're into this stuff.
Yeah.
Let me tell you the technologies we're going to showcase at Hybrid World. It's all great. Okay, so we have an absolutely smashing keynote speech from Professor Genevieve Bell. It's titled Designing Wonder in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And it's all about the fourth wave of industrialization. And then that will be followed by a series of talks about artificial intelligence and robotics. Dr. Philip Almeida, who was the hit speaker last year, he's coming back. And he's coming back to talk about how to make trustworthy machines that we can trust with our lives.
Oh, wow.
He'll be followed by Marita Chang. Marita Chang is she developed girl coders. So it's, sorry, RoboGals. I'm mistaken. RoboGals. It's about robotics and girls. It's, again, like a story of total empowerment, a group of people that don't often get associated with robots. But of course, these technologies are accessible to them. She's been focused on that. We're going to have other things as well. So one of the big things that's been cooking in Adelaide with the advent of the fast internet is a smart city project, and we're going to get an update on that. I think that's very important because what some people don't realize with all the advent of robotic vehicles of all sorts is that you need a smart city. The two go hand in hand. Smart vehicles without smart cities aren't going to be as effective. If you have a smart city, by which I mean there's sensors in, say, the streetlights and all the traffic signals and so forth, so that they're instrumented and aware and they can track events in the real world, then the robot vehicles will communicate with them. And you can start to think of transportation as a system that's governed perhaps by a kind of artificial intelligence.
And that'll be
so
great
that starts
for
to turn
emergency services as well, because
Precisely.
we won't have to wholly rely on really loud sirens to get the message across to get out of the way. Cars
Exactly
will
right.
automatically get out
Exactly
of the way, and people would be able to get to hospitals or help a lot quicker.
That's exactly right. Or in a place where there's, some violence that happens on the street, if the streets, if the streetlights are instrumented, they can actually triangulate and detect sounds like gunshots and send public safety groups over there to solve the problem and deal with the problem. And they can also put environmental sensors on the streetlights, and so they can track emissions as well. And you can start to detect patterns. So often traffic patterns will cause more vehicle emissions to occur. And so the smart city is a really cool concept. We'll talk a bit about that at Hybrid World. And then we have a full day dedicated to showcasing the most exciting companies in Australia. And I'm really, really thrilled about the lineup that we have because I think they're going to be fantastic companies that are joining us, including a lot of companies that are developing private space fleets and space technology. So this is an exciting area for two ways. One, it's a new field, privatized space.
Yeah.
Again, like 10 years ago, it was kind of didn't sound plausible, but now it's quite common. There are more than 10 companies based in Adelaide that are developing space technology for Australia.
Really? I had no
We're
idea.
Showcase. Yeah. We have a half a day focused on that. So that will be a terrific program. I think I mentioned we're going to have autonomous machines, autonomous vehicles, and so forth. So we'll have some great new information presentations about that. And then another topic that we're doing that I'm excited about is we're calling it Bigger Than Australia. So last year when we did Hybrid World, one of the things that I heard from many of the attendees is they talked about the tall poppy syndrome, which is this uniquely Australian phenomenon where Australians are just too modest. They're too humble. It's a lovely trait. Don't get me wrong. I find it incredibly attractive. but it makes it difficult for Australian firms to compete at the global level. They're inhibited in some ways. And so a number of the people who came to the event last year, they took me aside and they said, the problem here in Australia is people don't think bigger than Australia. They think about building a business just for Adelaide or just for South Australia or just for within the Australian borders. But we don't have the kind of entrepreneurs here who can think on a global scale. And I said, that's ridiculous. Of course you do. Every country has those people. What you don't do is you don't celebrate them and encourage them and support them and give them the right conditions to grow. So you need to solve that problem. But it's not that you don't have the people. Of course you've got those people. So we said, okay, this year we're going to showcase the companies that are thinking bigger than Australia, companies that are designed from the ground up, from the start, to grow beyond national boundaries and beyond national borders and scale to the global level. And I'm really thrilled about that because I think that's a great message of empowerment for people in Australia.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it's cool. And the space companies fit that mold. The space companies are good examples of that. We're going to have some controversial topics too in the space section because they're, so each of these ideas is so new that it touches a whole range of issues that we haven't had a discussion about as a society. And so we'll have some points of view that differ, some conflict perhaps, or at least some productive discussions.
Absolutely. Are there any, I guess to try to put some relevance on some of the listeners of this podcast, could you give us an example of any positive representation of AI in science fiction? Has it ever been done properly?
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, sure. It's usually subtle. So think about it. If the AI is a protagonist in the story, it's almost always the enemy, right? But that's not entirely true. So first of all, think of the Alien movies. In the Alien movies, there's always a robot character who always tends to get ripped in half or something dramatic happens to that person, but he always lives. And in the Alien movies, that character is ambiguous. That character is sometimes pro-human and sometimes ambiguous. So that's not 100%, the Terminator character, right?
Yeah.
And then in Star Wars, of course, you've got C-3PO and frankly, most of the droids are positive, except for the droid armies, I guess.
Yes.
So there's a range, right? And there's Robbie the robot. And this notion of building some automaton that can serve humanity but maybe threaten humanity, that's not a new idea. That goes all the way back to the legends of the golem from the Czech Republic, way back in the Middle Ages. And those ideas are not new. People have been thinking about this idea of building a machine that's like a human for many, many years.
I guess the first depiction in film was actually Metropolis.
Yeah, I think so. That's what although there is also a film that might predate that. It's also a German expressionist film about the golem, and that's worth looking at. It's worth watching both of those to see how these inventions, these creations, mystify us, defy us, threaten us. It's an ambiguous relationship. That's a much more textured and nuanced story.
Yeah, so I guess I wonder what this obsession is with mankind or with the film industry, with wanting to depict this sort of fear based in our own creations. If we're creating
there's two different things going on here. So one of them is that there's an issue for the film industry, and then there's just humanity's obsession with the stuff that we create, right? So we have a mixed relationship with our own technology. And to me, that's why I say our fears about robotics and artificial intelligence, they're really we're projecting a fear that we have about other people onto the machines. The machines are not the fear. It's the people who are behind them, or the people who create them, or people who use them. That's typically what the fear is really about. That's one idea. The second one is the motion picture industry. To finance a motion picture today, you must pre-sell the international rights. If you're going to make a huge, big budget movie with a lot of special effects, you have to pre-sell international rights. You have to raise tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars from pre-sale. Well, when you sell to a foreign territory or an international territory, naturally the people in that country want to know who are the characters, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. And if the bad guys look like those people, they're not going to want your movie.
That's true.
And so Hollywood needs a villain that doesn't look like anybody on the planet, because they're trying to make movies that work in every possible region in the world. So you can't now, in the old days, you could have a bad guy that was from Russia or something, but now you can't quite do that, right? So you have to create multicultural protagonists who are positive, and then you have to have something that isn't even a human as your enemy. And that's why we see so many films like the Transformers, where there's just, mechanical violence. It's the strangest thing to watch, I think. It's watching Robo Wars. You have one big robot smashing another big robot, and nobody really cares. It's like destructive, mindless violence, but where no one actually gets hurt. That's the movie problem.
Yeah, I think there are some, I guess, positive portrayals of, I guess, humans merged with AI or merged with robotics. So you've got Edge of Tomorrow, you've got Ghost in the Shell. Even though technology is demonstrated as risky or hackable, there's still that air of control that people have, which is in reality, that's it. We will put controls in place. Not everything will be open to manipulation as much as
or some of it will, because it always is, because we never quite get it right. It's always a work in progress.
Oh yeah, that's
what
why
people
we
don't
have
understand
patches.
is that yeah, exactly. Everyone, it's funny, everyone expects this stuff to be a product, like it's finished. And I keep trying to tell people it's a process. It's not a product. It's a process. It's a work in progress. It'll never be done. We'll keep improving it forever. And meanwhile, that issue, like zeroing in on the dark side of the issue, or where it's hackable, or the security, it's a worthwhile question to talk about, but it totally dominates the conversation. And what no one's talking about is, how does this stuff serve us? How does it make business work better? How does it meet more needs? How does it get food to more people? How does it reduce our consumption? How does it make life more precise, more accurate, more predictable, more maintainable? And those are the answers, honestly. Every use of artificial intelligence right now is being done to increase efficiency, to do predictive maintenance so that we can predict when something's going to fail and we can fix it before it breaks. So that keeps machines running, it keeps factories running, it keeps deliveries happening, and then that's less downtime and that's less lost time, and that means we're more productive. What very few people appreciate, but they need to understand, is one simple principle in economics, which is that you can't give people increases in wages unless you increase productivity. So an increase in productivity creates the pool of wealth from which wages come from. If you don't increase productivity, you can't increase wages. If you increase wages without an increase in productivity, you're creating inflation, and that's a big problem for everybody. And so we need to find new ways to increase productivity. If you look at the productivity statistics in labor for the last 20 years, they've been flat. They haven't been increasing. And we have a real problem there. And it's particularly true in the service industries, which is where a lot of people work right now. That's why everyone's focused on robotics and artificial intelligence. We're trying to squeeze out more efficiency and thereby more productivity so that we create a bigger pool of wealth so that people can get a raise. Wages have been flat for 20 years in many countries, particularly here in the US. That's a real problem for people. Technology can solve that problem. I know it's not as cool as like spaceships with laser beams and like robots fighting each other and so forth. Those are cool, interesting stories. The real use of this technology is entirely pragmatic. It's practical. They're solving real problems today. And sometimes those problems are boring and the solutions are a little bit less exotic than what you get from Hollywood. But I hope you understand that that's just as exciting. Actually, to me, it's more exciting because it has a lasting impact and it shows me kind of the direction for the future. If you come to Hybrid World and if your listeners attend Hybrid World, what I can guarantee is that they will come away inspired and educated and feeling more empowered about the technology future. And they'll probably have new ideas that they never had before. And that's what I'm trying to get people to see. One of my main messages as curator is that all of these new technologies fit together. They're like the building blocks for the next wave of innovation. And so we have a diverse group of speakers. We have people from all over the world. We have people of all different races and genders. And they're going to come together to talk about the technology. All of them are experts in the sense that they are practitioners. They're not theorists. These are actually people who do this stuff for a living. And so they're very pragmatic people trying to solve real world problems. I'm talking too fast.
That's okay. That's not a problem at all. I thought it was really great that this sort of initiative is being put together, because I know that in a lot of ways Australia were very backward thinking when it came to broadband, and even when it came to how technology could improve even government services, and people weren't very embracing of it. I'm hoping that in future that people won't have to line up for Centrelink, for example, something that people can relate to, or like having to try to find a car park space when you go to the shops, because your car will know where the space is and park automatically.
Yeah.
And then if
that's exactly right.
You're not wholly abled, you'd be able to take a smart trolley and it will take you to the shop that you want to go to. It will know exactly what is missing out of your fridge or your cupboard, or what you could cook today, or what vegetables are in season, what is local produce and what isn't, what sort of food you should be eating because of what sort of diet your doctor has prescribed for you. So, I'm all clued in on this sort of future, and I really want to embrace it. I'm looking forward to, I guess, the transhumanism aspect as well, merging with AI to better ourselves and to kind of like, I guess, move towards the future so we could be more prepared. Because I think there's definite limitations to the human brain and what we can do and how much information we can hold and how quickly we can take that information on. So I think
I'm so with you. I mean, think about it this way. Look at the state of the planet that we're in right now. We seem to have chronic war, right? The United States has been at war in some part of the world for every day of this century since this young century started.
Yes.
So conflicts are with us. We seem to be degrading the planet. The climate change is a real issue. We seem to be consuming resources at a rate that they will not be replenished, and some of those resources are non-renewable. We're going to run out of things. Justice is fleeting in many countries. Democracy is being rolled back. You look at that and you go, okay, that's the best that humans can do. These biological machines that are running the planet right now. We've proliferated across the entire scope of the planet. We've covered the entire Earth. We've reshaped the surface of the planet to suit us, and we've turned it into our park. And look what we're doing with it. We're polluting it. We're degrading it. We're depleting it of resources. We're not treating people fairly or equally. We're not redistributing wealth. You look at that and you go, really? This is the best that we can do with our biological brains?
Yeah.
Bring on the fucking machines. Bring on the robots. I want to augment everybody. I want to have people with all the knowledge in the world at their fingertips. I want everybody to have a neural implant so that they can summon higher levels, higher magnitudes of intelligence and intellect, so we can elevate our politics, elevate our discussions about what's right and what's fair and what are we really doing on this planet to share, to help each other, to grow, to manage it, to maintain it, to keep it nice, not just for humans, but for other creatures as well.
Yes,
we don't have those kinds of conversations because we're so limited right now. We still come from the scarcity mechanic, this notion that there's only so much to go around, so we should grab as much as we can and hang on to it.
And again,
that's what's ruining us.
It's the fear as well. Like you said, the fear of the unknown, of persons unknown to us and their history. You know what? I think if people had the opportunity to have a microchip in their brain where they could summon human history, they'll see that these wars have been fought many times before, often on the exact same subject. We've had, ruthless rulers of every race, of every type, of every, I guess, political stance. So I guess, everything would be decided on or based on facts and information. And I think when you take that into account, then people would make better decisions. And when you're ignorant and you've got, I don't know, I guess people who still believe in the flat earth, then there's going to be a huge disparity in decision making, at least correct types of decision making.
You're really zooming in on something that's important and it's worth spending some time on. And again, this goes to the redistribution of resources. It's about education. It's about making sure that everybody gets aware of these opportunities and has access to them. And one of the cool things about decentralization that's happening now is like the latest trend in technology is decentralized software platforms. Those are accessible to anyone, but they're controlled by no one. And that's a radical reversal of the way things have worked in the last 100 years, where we've centralized everything at a massive scale in the industrial era. We're starting to redistribute that out. And this democratization of technology and decentralization, those are powerful, powerful concepts. So those are good things that you're raising, good themes that you're raising. These are the kinds of debates that I want us to have. Let me just offer one more thing, because you made a comment there about our governments. I want to point out that the government of South Australia has been incredibly supportive of this program. It's hard to explain what it is. It's also hard to explain what the benefit of it is. As you can see from this conversation, some of it's kind of nebulous. Some of it is about just opening people's eyes and making them aware. It's a little bit hard to ascribe a return on investment to that, right? Now, of course, I'm a big believer that these technologies also are going to be great businesses. And I think there are many examples that we're going to show this year of companies in South Australia and elsewhere in Australia that are developing great big businesses based on these technologies. But that said, the government of South Australia has been staunch in its support for this program. They understand innovation is important. And they also understand that sometimes, Australia in general and South Australia in particular, great places to live with super smart people and tremendous education resources, but they're just positioned on the wrong side of the planet. So they're far away from everything. What we're trying to do with technology, particularly with the high-speed network, is to collapse the distance that separates Australia from the rest of the world, and thereby bring Australian innovation to the forefront and allow Australians to have access to other markets and thereby grow their businesses outside of Australian borders. This program, I think everybody in government, regardless of party affiliation or whatever perspective they might bring, who could possibly be against that? I think they're all for it, and they've been incredibly supportive. So don't be too hard on your local governments there. I go world, and I have to tell you, the Australian governments are keenly conscious of this, and they're really focused on it, and they seem to be very supportive of it.
I'm really glad about that, because I was wondering for a while.
Well, look, all you have to do is contrast what's happening in your country with what's happening in my country, where, in the United States, it's like we're pulling up the drawbridge and it's U.S. versus everybody. And this is about the stupidest idea you could possibly imagine, right? You have the country that was kind of the leader of the free world is now saying, no, you know what? We're retreating into our borders. We're going to put tariffs on every good that comes in. We're going to penalize our allies. This is insane. It's a recipe for chaos. And I think the United States will end up suffering the consequences most severely, because already when I go to Europe and Asia, in those countries, people are talking very serious about retaliation against the U.S. Well, once we get into a trade war, that's where working people get hurt hard. That's where farmers get hurt hard. That is where people who work in factories get hard, because factories close because they can't import material. Farms get shut down, or they can't sell as much because they're not able to export. The tariffs hurt them as well. So if we have a trade war, that is going in the exactly wrong direction. And I just want to contrast that with what they're doing in Adelaide, right? The government of South Australia is inviting international entrepreneurs to join us and to inspire local people. So this is like an international idea exchange. That's the exact opposite of what we're seeing happening in the United States right now, where they're closing the doors, closing the boundaries, pushing immigrants away, turning away innovation from overseas. I think those are all the mistaken notions, and I think what's happening in Australia is actually a global embrace. It's the right way to approach it. I want to encourage it. I'm psyched to be a part of it. I'm really thrilled to come down there and share all this information with people there.
Yeah, I really like the fact that of all places, but Adelaide, because it's really tucked away from the world. Not as much as Tasmania, but Adelaide doesn't really have a pull for anything, except I know that they're good at wine.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're non-GMO, so they have fantastic food. They are the Napa Valley of Australia. You're right about the wine. That is one of their great strengths. But don't forget, they're also the manufacturing center, right? So until fairly recently, they had a booming auto industry. And now what's happening is those empty auto plants are going to become places where they assemble robot vehicles. So there is a view towards renaissance, a kind of industrial renaissance. When we talk about Industry 4.0, that's exactly what they're focused on in South Australia. How do we kickstart the next wave of smart industry?
That's true. And that's a really good point of utilizing the old auto industry and things. Yeah. That stuff is sitting around. We've got people who are ready to be educated and trained to embrace this sort of future that's coming. Better to be a part of it than to reject it.
Exactly right. I mean, at least make the information accessible, and then if people choose not to engage for whatever reason, well, that's their choice. But you want to make sure that your elected representatives are at least making the information accessible to people, and that's what we're doing. And by the way, Hybrid World's not limited to South Australia or Adelaide. It's open to everybody. And we have people coming from outside of Australia for this very reason. And the goal is to turn it into kind of a global innovation hub. I hope to see you there. I hope the folks who are listening to this will come. I want to meet you there. You'll see it is every bit as good as I'm describing it. We have phenomenal speakers on extraordinarily interesting topics. But what I want to point out is that this is not futuristic science fiction stuff. These are practical software technologies that are being applied right now. They're going to be increasingly important in the next 5 years. So if you're thinking right now about how your business might change in the next 5 years or what career choices you might make, by attending this event, by attending Hybrid World in Adelaide, you'll be exposed to the most important technologies where all the future opportunities are.
I definitely want to go. I will have to try to find a babysitter for my kids and make the time to make my way there. But thank you.
On. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you for coming on to the show.
Sure. Happy to do it. Hope to see you there then.
Okay.
It's happening. It's all happening at the end of July, and the conference I'm referring to happens on the 23rd and 24th of July in Adelaide.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
This is Colony Ship Covenant, reporting. All crew members apart from Daniels in Tennessee tragically perished in a solar flare incident. All colonists in hypersleep remain intact and undisturbed, on course for Orgai 6. Hopefully this transmission will reach the network and be relayed in 6 years.
You can now support Yutani Podcast on Patreon and subscribe to yutani.blog to stay up to date.